Aloham, dear friends, and guests as well. There is a subject I mentioned here and there in my comments, and I was thinking about, and I heard about. It's the subject of I am. Many people are very fixed on that concept of I am. And I know the subject is very confusing sometimes. Still, I want to say a few words from my heart about the subject. And that is that this I am, to me, is not very harmonic, in the sense that it comes across as that we are all just one, and ultimately this says, actually, I am God, you are God, we are all God. And because this is not really what I feel, what I experience, etc., I want to say a few words. That is that the Supreme Consciousness is always all-powerful and supremely independent. And there are a lot of references to that in Vedic literature. And these particles that we are, of which many think we would just be an illusory particle state because of our ego consciousness. Like, giving the example, a part of the sky that is captured in a pot, or the reflection of the moon that appears on the surface of many water vessels, etc. That is partially also correct, because there is oneness in pure consciousness, but as particles we are never the complete, and we may join in our consciousness so that we more or less cease to have our own separate existence. Yet separation and oneness in the spiritual sense are not the same as in the material sense. The only thing why some distinction remains even in the unified consciousness, supreme consciousness, is for the sense of love. So there is so many, actually was just one energy. It's all about the relation between the supreme enjoyer and the supreme pleasure-giving potency. In essence, the soul of that supreme consciousness is one. Yet, for the sake of love, there is also distinction and flow of pastimes. And that is to be considered. This is even so on the liberated plane. It's not that we have only variety here in the material domain and that the spiritual domain is less. That would be quite ridiculous. Actually, all diversities in this world are just some lower frequency reflections of the eternal supreme. So even when the now illusory thinking separated part and parcel when that realizes its true identity, then there will still be some distinction. We are parts of shakti, or potency, and the supreme potency consciousness is also personified. That's the abode of love. That's one name the Indian tradition gives, or that was one of the eternal names also of that consciousness, is radhrani. She is described as svarup shakti, the complete potency. So, and she's the aspect of power, of energy, and of love. And we are particles of that. And that supreme consciousness is one, the enjoying aspect and the fulfilling aspect. And they are flowing, interchanging, but they are two aspects of the supreme consciousness. And so we are created as an image of that. We have also both tendencies in us. But our reason why we came here is because we were not in full realization about our position towards the Supreme. That we are just particles of the Supreme. And so we cannot be the center of the expression of affection. But just aligning with the desire of the Supreme, then we can act according to our position of minute particle of that Supreme Consciousness. So there are these aspects in consciousness in the Supreme and also in the individual parcel of the Supreme Consciousness. And that is why we are here, why do we have this plane to experience that we are not Supreme Controller, Supreme Enjoyer. And that is a very humbling experience, to come into the material plane and notice you cannot control it. You can influence it through your conscious frequency that you emanate, of course. And in that sense, we are co-creators, we are whatever you want to call it. But to think that I am that Supreme Consciousness, sorry, then you have still not learned the reason why we came here. And because that is, in a sense, loveless, to not recognize one's own position in comparison to the Supreme Consciousness, which is all consciousness. This lack of love will cause one to fall down again, even from the liberated state, into the material world because of disrespect. And or just it's not functional in the spiritual sense, yeah. And we have to see, we have to be in our true identity. And that is also called jaiva dharma, or the nature of the soul. So these are just some thoughts about the subject of I am, and that's why for me it's more loving to speak of we are instead. Yeah. So we are seems more lovely to me, and we are tiny particles of that love flow. And so I wish that this love flow consciousness may awaken in all conditioned souls to the great we are. Aloham, Jai Nitai, Jai Shri Radhe Shyam.